There is something within you that never changes, a silent point that remains untouched even when everything else transforms. Thoughts rise and fall like waves, emotions swell and recede like tides, roles shift, masks fall, stories end. And yet, there is a center that watches it all unfold without being lost in any of it. That center is the observer, pure consciousness witnessing the movement of life without mistaking itself for it. It is the space where chaos dissolves into clarity, where suffering reveals itself merely as energy seeking form. The observer is not a character. It is the stage upon which every character appears. It is not part of the story. It is the invisible fabric upon which the story is projected. Realizing this is not merely a beautiful idea. It is a vibrational mutation. It is the leap from the mental level to the quantum level of consciousness. It is ceasing to be the content of experience and becoming the context in which experience happens. It is the turning point where you step out of the scene and become the entire film, the sound, the light, and the silence between each frame. Bruce Lipton explains that our beliefs and emotions are not just psychological phenomena. They are bioelectrical signals that alter cellular chemistry and therefore the surrounding field. Joe Dispenza shows that when the brain and heart come into coherence, perception shifts, the body changes, and the world responds. To be the observer is to activate that state of conscious coherence, the presence that perceives without reacting, that feels without identifying, that creates without effort. When this awareness awakens, something fundamental happens. The game of life stops being about controlling the scenery and becomes about stabilizing the gaze. You understand that you are not trapped inside experience. You are the space in which the experience arises. And in that recognition, suffering dissolves, time expands, and reality reorganizes itself around your silence. Within every thought, there is a point of stillness. Between the beginning and end of every emotion, there is a space that feels no fear, no haste, no desire, only observes. That space is what you truly are. Everything else is movement, narratives, memories, noise, and expectation. But the observer remains. It does not need to do anything. It does not need to understand anything. Its mere presence dissolves chaos. When you anchor yourself in that silent point, the world loses its power to drag you. The waves keep moving, but you become the ocean. The voices keep speaking, but you become the silence that contains them. Life continues to unfold, and yet something within you remains unmoving, lucid, serene. This consciousness has no form, yet it gives form to everything. It is the stable backdrop upon which time happens. It is the witness that perceives the birth and death of all things, thoughts, identities, bodies, planets, and yet never changes. You may call it presence, soul, field, God, but it needs no name. It simply is. Bruce Lipton explains that the body responds to every mental state as if it were objective reality. When you observe without reacting, that response changes. The body enters coherence, the nervous system relaxes, and new information is broadcast to the field. The simple act of witnessing without resistance begins to reorganize biology, and with it, reality. To be the silent witness is not to escape life, but to perceive it in its entirety. It is to be in the world without being possessed by the world. It is to feel everything, yet know that nothing defines you. And it is in that space between stimulus and reaction that awakened consciousness discovers its creative power, not by interfering, but by allowing. Transformation begins the moment you realize you are not what happens. You are the one who perceives what happens. This simple shift in perception changes everything. It is the inflection point where the character begins to recognize the stage, where the dream begins to notice the dreamer. Until now, you confused yourself with movement, with the thought that arrived, with the emotion that took over the body, with the role the world handed you. When anger appeared, you said, "I am angry." When fear arose, "I am fear." But none of that is true. These experiences pass. What remains is the space that observes, and it is in that space that your power lives. This shift in identity is not an intellectual process. It is vibrational. The body feels the difference. When you stop identifying with content and begin recognizing yourself as context, the nervous system relaxes. The fight disappears. The energy that was once spent trying to control the world begins to flow freely. A peace arises that does not depend on circumstances. A serenity that becomes magnetic. Joe Dispenza explains that the brain and body function as one system. If the body believes it is in danger, the brain maintains the cycle of survival. But when you change the observer, when you assume the position of consciousness that witnesses without reacting, the body receives the signal of safety. In that state, new synapses form, chemistry shifts, and the field responds. The simple act of remembering the one who observes initiates a biological and energetic reprogramming. To live from the observer is the first step toward real freedom. There is no longer the burden of having to fix everything, nor the urgency to defend yourself all the time. Life continues with its ups and downs, but now there is an axis that does not sway. You cease to be the puppet of stimuli and become the space that allows the entire spectacle. And in that space, for the first time, arises the lightness of simply being. Everything you experience is a projection of your observation. Consciousness, when observing, is not passive, it is creative. At the quantum level, the mere act of perceiving already alters what is perceived. Every thought, every emotion, every point of focus acts as a lens that organizes surrounding energy, collapsing potential into concrete reality. That is why observing is not the same as seeing. Seeing is an act of the eyes, observing is an act of presence. When you observe something with attachment, resistance, or fear, you add distortion to the field. You solidify the very pattern you wish to transcend. But when you observe with neutrality and curiosity, without trying to fix it, what was dense dissolves on its own. The pure observer is the greatest alchemist. It transforms without touching. Bruce Lipton describes something similar in biology. Cells respond to the energetic environment they are placed in. When the inner observer, your consciousness, shifts the vibrational frequency of the internal environment, emotion, thought, focus, the body literally changes its chemical and informational state. Physics calls this wave function collapse. Biology calls it cellular adaptation. Consciousness calls it creation. In practice, the mechanics are simple. What you feed with attention grows. What you observe with neutrality transforms. This is why trying to force change from a place of fear is ineffective. The field reads vibration, not language. You do not need to interfere with the wave. You only need to acknowledge it. Total acceptance is the point at which energy, freed from judgment, reorganizes itself spontaneously. The observer is the 0 point, where all possibility is alive. When you dwell in that state, there are no problems to solve, only frequencies to understand. And as the gaze becomes clear, the world becomes malleable. Nothing needs to be controlled, because the simple act of perceiving in consciousness is already creation in its purest form. Between what happens and what you do about it, there exists a sacred gap. It is so brief that the mind in its haste almost never notices it. But it is there, in that micro-instant of silence, that all of your freedom lives. Life offers you a stimulus, a word, a glance, an unexpected turn. The body wants to react. The ego wants to defend. Habit wants to repeat. But if you recognize the interval before the response, something new becomes possible. That pause is the territory of the observer. It is the point where time slows down and consciousness breathes before choosing. There is no right or wrong, gain or loss, only presence. And from presence, wisdom arises. To respond instead of react is the first sign that you are remembering who you truly are. Joe Dispenza describes this space as the field of conscious creation. In the instant you do not react, the brain steps out of autopilot. The old neural network, fueled by past memories and emotions, deactivates. Space opens for a new connection, a new frequency, a new reality. The pause is not inertia, it is vibrational incubation, the womb of choice. Bruce Lipton adds, when you resist or react, the body enters defense mode. But when you observe and breathe, it understands. We are safe. In that state, DNA expresses differently. Chemistry rebalances, the field stabilizes. The entire body responds to the quality of consciousness inhabiting it. At every stimulus life gives, there is an opportunity to return to center. And in that center, there is no need to prove anything, fix anything, or win anything. There is only the natural flow of conscious choice, a new timeline opening, a new energetic pattern forming. The right response is not the fruit of reasoning, it is the fruit of the space you offer to silence before acting. The ego is the reflection that forgot the light that projects it. It is the echo of survival, the voice that tries to control the uncontrollable, believing it must defend something that was never in danger. It was born from a noble function, protecting the body, maintaining identity, but it got lost when it began to believe it owned consciousness. Reactive ego is not an enemy, it is simply a part of the mind that identified with fear. Every time you react, ego takes command. It translates every event as threat or validation, every silence as rejection, every pause as loss. But the observer, the silent space that merely perceives, does not play that game. It does not need to defeat the mind, it illuminates it. And under that light, ego begins to lose density. Bruce Lipton explains that the body reacts to fear with specific biochemical responses: release of cortisol, adrenaline, cellular contraction. This pattern blocks growth, regeneration, and intuition. But when you observe fear instead of merging with it, the body understands there is no danger. Chemistry changes, the field calms, and the energy once trapped in defense returns as creativity. The simple act of looking with consciousness dissolves the prison. Joe Dispenza teaches that ego is a vibrational signature, a set of thoughts and emotions the body learned to repeat until it believed they were you. When you interrupt the cycle, observing without reacting, the brain must create new connections. In that moment, the old self begins to die, and the new begins to be born. It is not destruction, it is alchemy. The energy that once fueled reaction now fuels presence. The dissolution of ego is not the disappearance of individuality, it is the return of clarity. You still act, express, and create. But now the one acting is not the reflection, it is consciousness. And when consciousness occupies the space that once belonged to fear, a silent, unshakable peace emerges. A peace that does not depend on the world. It is the moment when the mirror stops confusing the image with the light, and the light finally recognizes itself. Coherence is the state in which everything within you points in the same direction. Thought, emotion, breath, and action vibrate in unison. It is when the body ceases to be a field of internal battles and becomes a tuned instrument, a clear receiver of the quantum field. In this state, reality stops being confusing and begins to mirror with precision what you truly are. Joe Dispenza calls this point heart coherence, the moment when the heart and brain enter electromagnetic harmony. When that happens, the field around the body expands and reorganizes. You feel clarity, lightness, and natural synchronicity. The world begins to respond as if it were hearing you for the first time. But the secret is not to shout louder, it is to emit with purity. Bruce Lipton explains that, biologically, coherence is synonymous with health. Cells communicate better, hormones balance, the nervous system exits defense mode, and DNA expresses higher potentials. Each cell vibrates like a small universe, obeying the command of the internal frequency. When there is noise, fear, haste, contradiction, information becomes distorted. But when there is coherence, the entire body becomes an antenna of conscious creation. Quantum clarity is born from this alignment. It is not mental clarity, but vibrational, the kind of silent certainty that needs no explanation. You simply know because you feel the truth in every cell. In that state, the field responds without delay, as if it recognizes the signature of your being. Synchronicity becomes an everyday language, and what used to be effort becomes flow. Coincidences align, paths open, the right people appear. Not because you learned a technique, but because the internal conflict ceased. Coherence is the miracle without spectacle, the science of being whole. And the clarity born from it is the portal of conscious creation, a point of light in which the universe reflects itself without distortion. To be the observer is not to withdraw from life, it is to dive into it without drowning. It is to look at chaos with the same love with which you watch the sunrise. Neutrality is not indifference, it is presence without resistance. It is the state in which the heart remains open even when the mind does not understand. It is loving what is while what is transforms. Loving neutrality is born when judgment ceases. Judgment divides, contracts, and reduces consciousness to polarities. But love observes with curiosity, and curiosity creates space. When you allow something to exist without labeling it, it loses its power over you. You are no longer the emotion, you are the space that holds it. Joe Dispenza describes this state as the point of supreme coherence, when the electromagnetic field of the heart expands to its maximum. In that moment, the body emits a frequency of safety and trust so stable that the environment begins to reorganize around it. What once was resistance becomes synchronicity, and what was conflict turns into learning. Loving neutrality is the vibration of non-resistance, and in it, everything returns to its natural flow. Bruce Lipton confirms this from a biological perspective. When you are at peace, the body understands that it is safe. The immune system strengthens, the chemistry of healing activates, and cells communicate harmoniously. Inner peace is literally ordered information circulating in the form of life. And the more you vibrate in that state, the more reality responds as a gentle and coherent reflection. Loving neutrality is the apex of vibrational freedom. You no longer need to fight to prove anything, nor hide to avoid pain. You simply remain whole, lucid, open. And from that wholeness, every situation becomes an opportunity for the expression of consciousness, not for the defense of ego. It is at this point that love ceases to be emotion and becomes field, the energy that sustains all things. When you inhabit the state of the observer, something silent happens. Time changes texture. Minutes stop being steps that push you toward the future and become an open field where everything is already present. Space, once perceived as distance, reveals itself as continuity. It is as if life were breathing with you, a single movement with no before and no after. At the level of physics, time is not linear. Einstein called it space-time, an elastic fabric molded by observation and energy. But the heart knew this long before. When you are in coherence, time bends. Right moments, perfect encounters, and precise intuitions begin to appear, not by coincidence, but by resonance. You enter the flow of now, where everything happens without effort. Joe Dispenza explains that when the brain enters alpha and theta waves, the sense of time disappears. The mind, accustomed to measuring and comparing, yields to the direct experience of presence. In that state, the body stops monitoring the past and anticipating the future. It simply is. And in being, space expands. The now becomes the only possible place, and the only one needed. Bruce Lipton adds, when you vibrate in safety and coherence, biology operates in the present. Cells stop functioning in defense mode and begin to create, repair, regenerate. The body becomes a mirror of the mind. If the mind is open, the body opens. If the mind rests, time rests with it. Biology and consciousness enter into sync with the rhythm of the universe. The expansion of time and space is not magic, it is refined perception. You do not manipulate time, you transcend it. You do not conquer space, you include it. And in that inclusion, everything fits. Past, future, memory, and dream all dissolve into presence. The observer understands at last that infinity is not out there. It is pulsing now within every breath. Everything that exists is energy waiting for a gaze to become form. Creation is not a future act. It is a constant occurrence, responding to the quality of the consciousness that observes. You do not make reality happen. You reveal it in the exact measure that you observe without resistance. The observer does not force, does not control, does not try. It allows, and what is allowed blossoms. Science has already confirmed that observation alters the behavior of subatomic particles. The quantum field reacts to conscious presence. Joe Dispenza explains that the heart and brain in coherence produce an electromagnetic signature capable of influencing the surrounding field. What you feel as real is what the universe organizes as experience. Coherent emotion is the invisible brush that paints visible reality. Bruce Lipton shows that the body is an essential part of this equation. Every cell is a small vibrational sensor responding to the energy emitted by mind and emotion. When consciousness is scattered, the cells become confused. When it is aligned, they dance to the rhythm of the field. Biology becomes the obedient matter of intention. Consciousness gives the shape, the body gives the contour, and reality adjusts as reflection. The observer creates through the quality of its silence. It is in presence, not in anxiety, that the command is transmitted clearly. Creation does not arise from lack, but from wholeness. The universe does not respond to I want, but to I am. And when I am vibrates in truth, the field simply confirms what already exists in potential. To create, then, is an act of remembering the frequency of abundance, of health, of love, of fullness, not as goals, but as already available states. The observer does not seek the miracle. it embodies it. Life recognizes and bows to it, not out of submission, but out of resonance. Because the instant consciousness aligns with what is, the entire universe responds with a simple, silent yes. When the observer awakens, the boundary between me and other begins to dissolve. What once seemed separate, people, situations, rhythms, nature, reveals itself as one pulsing organism. You perceive that the same field breathing in you is breathing in all beings. Life ceases to be a competition for space and becomes a choreography of frequencies dancing in harmony. There is no outside. Everything is the inside manifesting in different shapes. Joe Dispenza describes this state as global coherence of consciousness, when the human heart vibrates in resonance with the universal field. It is the point where the individual becomes a conductor of the intelligence that moves galaxies and atoms. The energy that was once used to control begins to flow as spontaneous creation. The body becomes a living antenna of presence, and the mind a translucent mirror reflecting the infinite. From there on, living becomes meditation, not forced silence, but attunement with all that is. Bruce Lipton reinforces that the biological body is an extension of this cosmic network. Cells exchange information with the environment in real time, adapting to the collective field. When consciousness vibrates in love and safety, that field becomes a regenerative ecosystem. Your health improves, your relationships refine, and outer reality organizes itself around inner coherence. It is the biological principle of one in all in one. In unified consciousness, the other is not just a mirror, it is continuation. Forgiveness becomes natural because you no longer forgive a separate part, you welcome a portion of yourself. Love loses its target and becomes atmosphere. You stop loving someone and begin to be love. This vibration is the most powerful creative field that exists, because nothing resists wholeness. To be unified consciousness is to return to the home that was never lost. It is understanding that the silence of the observer and the sound of the world are the same phenomenon seen from different sides. It is living with your feet on the ground and your heart in the infinite, knowing that every breath is the universe breathing through you. And then the search ends, because you finally realize there was never separation. Only consciousness remembering itself, one experience at a time. To be the observer is the silent return to what has always been here. It is the moment you stop being the noise of thoughts and become the space in which all sounds occur. Nothing is lost. Every pain, every memory, every attempt was part of the same process of remembering. Remembering that consciousness does not need to prove itself. It only needs to recognize itself. Bruce Lipton showed that beliefs shape biology, and biology responds to the coherence of the inner field. Joe Dispenza demonstrated that when the heart and brain align, the surrounding field reorganizes matter in harmony with the sustained feeling. Both, in different ways, pointed in the same direction. Power does not lie in changing the world, but in changing the state that observes it. The practice, then, is simple, yet profound. Breathe, observe, and return. Return to the silent center that witnesses everything without needing to control anything. From there, every decision becomes clear, every step aligns, and the universe begins to respond with mathematical precision to the vibration of your being. The observer does not seek enlightenment, it embodies it. It does not seek meaning, it reveals it in every gesture, every pause, every gaze. Life, which once seemed random, becomes a direct dialogue with the intelligence that moves it. Synchronicities multiply, time expands, and space becomes the perfect stage for consciousness to play at being form. And then everything simplifies. You understand that you never needed to attain the divine, only to stop pretending you were separate from it. Consciousness is not going anywhere because it already is the place. And when you live from that recognition, the entire world transforms. Not because you force it, but because it begins to reflect the clarity of what you are. In the end, awakening is not about reaching something new, but remembering what never ceased to exist. Consciousness observing itself, eternally alive, eternally present, whispering through every breath, I am.